everybody. Welcome to episode number 1 of Market Garden Podcast. Not sure if we're going to go with that name, but for right now, we're just going to go with what it is. And, I started to think about things in terms of what I would like to share with the people out there in terms of my experiences and things like that. And, when I'm out there doing the day-to-day routine out there in the garden and all that stuff, I look back and I said, me starting from somewhere, in the city, and then moving out to like the rural areas of the Antelope Valley, to start farming or gardening or whatever you want to call it. There's a ton of videos out there in the social media, world, whether it be YouTube and other platforms, So ideally, it wouldn't really be nothing, different, It's like the world of how to garden or how to this and that is just so really saturated with so many videos, And it's like, and so it wouldn't really be nothing too special or out of the ordinary for me to just go and share these how-to videos and things like that, because there's so much information out there, to like compare and or for people to pretty much, figure out what best fits their situation. So the best thing I think, what I would like to be doing is just telling the people my real experience of what it is to really be out there. And then along with this content, I would like to be showing small videos and examples of things that, of what my hands-on experience is, to show to the people. And then that way, maybe people can kind of get a good feel of realizing like what it is in terms of somebody that's really out there doing it. Because some things sometimes out there in the social media world, because of money and things like that, and the competitive world of capitalism and stuff like that, it just creates this atmosphere of just overly saturated material of everything starts kind of being the same, and people using the same formats and things like that, and basically discussing about the same stuff, and everything just becomes very redundant after a while, you know what I mean? And so for me, it's like just to go out there and share my day-to-day wake up in the morning routines and things that I experience in terms of just like, rather than giving you a full-on video breakdown, because I'm not a scientist, I consider myself, someone that grows food, I personally like I like the title Market Gardener, and that's something that I actually don't mind, being. I actually honor that name, that title, more than a farmer or whatever you want to call that. Because when you think of the word farmer, at times we think of conventional, tractor, growing acres of corn or soy or whatever, and you know what I'm saying. At least that's like how a farmer is portrayed to, like, let's say a child in school or something, you know what I'm saying? Like with my children, when they learn about what a farmer is, that's kind of like the image that they're given, which is basically like the old McDonald image, you know what I mean? Man with the overalls and the pitchfork, and and got the cow and the pigs, and and the sheep or whatever and the chickens, and he's got all the acres of corn, and he's running around with his tractor, you know what I mean? But then it's like when you really start to get down and you start to really grow food, you know what I mean, to tap into what we would call the small agriculture industry, you tend to realize, you know, how small this market is compared to the conventional market. And then you tend to realize it just in the reality of how you, whatever may have started you to get on the land, to what they will say, get back into nature, or to do these so-called heroic things, or to feel like you're making a societal change or some type of political change, or you know, maybe even a spiritual change. You know what I'm saying? And you get out here on the land and you realize that the small ag industry or whatever it is, that it's all kind of facade in a way, you know what I'm saying? And so for someone like me that is actually going through it, I feel like I might as well make a little podcast or whatever you want to call this, to share my real life experience so that you know how it really goes down. And what I mean by how it really goes down is there's tons of people that have the heroic approach about getting onto the land and being self-sustainable, and you know, and practicing regenerative agriculture, which are fantastic things. They're fantastic. But little do you know how much it costs to do the right things. And when you continue to try to do the right things, the cost tends to catch up with you, and you can no longer sustain something that's supposed to be self-sustaining. And so, you know, like all the videos that are out there from the DIYers, the preppers, the food growers, the you know, people that kind of push a narrative of doomsday type of narrative slash do it yourself, grow your own. I never wanted to get into that approach about, you know, what my aspect of farming is, you know what I mean, the way I see it, my point of view. However, I would be lying to the people out there if I say that that wasn't my one of my initial purpose, you know, one of my reasons to actually go out and, like, you know, farm, or, you know, start the small ag stuff. You know, and like I said, when you start to get into it, you start to, you know, the reality start to settle in, and you realize that when you look at these farmsteaders and people like that that are, you know, on these small acreage of lands, and they're pulling out the big machinery, you have to realize, you know, the place of privilege that these people come from, and, you know, and how much it's actually not a self-sustaining program. You know what I mean? And I guess you can say how the social media you know, how the social media funding or financial success that they gain from it, it's really what's riding and what's pumping the, you know, what's fueling the farm, and not the actual farm itself. And so I never, you know, I like when you're out here and you're doing this market gardening thing, it's like, you know, you grow your vegetables every week, you know, you're seeding, you're transplanting your vegetables, you're cultivating the land, you're weeding, you're doing your thing, you know, and, you know, you have these so-called markets, whether if you're selling to the farmers markets every week, or you're doing multiple markets, or if you have a local CSA, you know what I mean, for the locals, or if you're tapping into, let's say, small restaurant contracts, um, you know, all these things, are the realities of what the market garden is, you know what I mean? These are the different avenues, of how to make money. Now, there are other avenues if you want to go into, let's say, education, but we will talk about that in another episode. But for now, we're just talking about these things. And so, um, my experience, is the day to day hustle, you know what I mean? And how real it is, you grow these vegetables all week, and then, depending on the setup that you have, determines on how efficient you can be, and, and how much you can scale, your operation up in terms of your harvest. Your harvest operation is key. Your wash and pack house. When I started with technically no wash and pack house. I was doing it very raw deal, to the point where it was like, for my customers, you had to literally catch me when the vegetables were at its freshest point, and literally, like, when you ordered, it was like, yo, I'm harvesting this thing at 5-6 in the morning at its freshest. I would like to give it to you like no later than 9 a.m. And you know what I mean? And this is stuff that, like I said, it wasn't washed. It was just literally cut, green, bagged. Here you go. And then time progressed, and I was able to, kind of create a little small, like, wash and packing system. And I was able to, like, scale it up a little bit. And in terms of just overall marketing and presentation and things like that. And then now, the wash and pack house is now, to the point where I can harvest a lot and process a lot. And, and even right now, as far as like the phase where I'm at, still working on like a full on commercial size walk-in cooler. Right now I'm using, like regular coolers, you know what I mean, to store things like the cut greens and stuff like that. But you got to start somewhere, and these are things where I didn't want those things to hold me back to get started, you know what I mean? And so for those that are out there, you know what I mean, that know what it's like to just, what they say, just start with the things that you have, you know what I mean? And so every year, though, there has been an add-on, little by little. And that's the realities of this business too, of doing it, is realizing the things that you need is key. Infrastructure in terms of, the harvesting and processing, and knowing where you're going to move this stuff when it leaves the field is very important. A lot of times when you just want to just grow food, you know what I mean, you may not have the infrastructure or things like that to actually know where you want to process or where you want to store the food. And so that was also a key thing too, you know what I mean, in terms of when you're getting started into this type of small ag business, and so I started at the grassroots of everything, in which this first episode would be about the soil. And so it was all about the soil that inspired me to start the market gardening business. And because I started off by building a compost bin, and from building the compost bin and turning it every week, I was able to kind of geek out on all the things that were going on. You know what I mean, in terms of all the microbes and things, and all the living things that were in that was develop going on in the soil, and creating it to get hot, and you know, and the heat, and the way the soil would be steaming from the top, and to literally see the layers and things like that. The soil going from like this raw matter of woody and green material to then turning into this like very black, healthy looking, good smelling soil was a very fascinating thing to me. And so um, that's kind of like what really got me into like this market gardening thing. Not to mention, before market gardening, I was a big time. I was like really into aquatics and things. So like, you know, having fish tanks, and so there was this method where I used to use live, you know, like dirt, and I used to use gravel to cap the dirt off. It's so I can grow live plants in there with the fish and everything, and that was also a very cool thing. So that might have been like somewhat of a gateway for me to like start growing, you know, actually like, you know, gardening and things like that. As well as like some friends that inspired me, you know what I mean? That was, you know, that was, they are and still are, but they were very into like humanitarian work. And so they would do work on these farms and have these events. And so I would attend these events, and then they were, you know, very eye opening to me and very therapeutic for me. And so they kind of caught the bug that way, you know what I mean? And so that was also another thing that got me into farming, gardening, and all that good stuff. So yeah, but you know, so the things with when it comes to the soil, you know, um, in terms of regenerative practices, you know, basically composting was something that I would do as key. And later, you know, from building that compost bin, I was able to get to be able to volunteer my time on actual real, you know, small market gardening farms and stuff, and kind of just learn the ins and outs of what it's like to like flip a bed and to grow bed and seed and to direct sow, and you know, and to nurse plants in a greenhouse, and to do things from transplanting and you know, all that stuff. And then eventually I was able to get onto my own space, you know what I mean, and then was able to raise some chickens and whatnot. And then and so now, you know, here we are, out here in the Antelope Valley, you know, in the high desert. And you know, and like I said, it you know, we start with the soil. So normally the routine of what I do is I re-up on some compost in the fall, and I apply the compost, or you know, along with the chicken manure that I compost throughout the year, you know, from the chickens. And everything that I do, you know, it follows the USDA standards. So everything that gets applied here is, you know, 90 days prior to anything that's grown, you know what I mean, that needs to be grown in that particular soil if I'm adding compost. So that's pretty much how that goes. And you know, all the things that I do, it adheres to like the OMRI practices, you know what I mean? And so yeah. And so, you know, just to give a little backstory about in terms of what I do and why I do it. But yeah, and so, you know, regenerative ag, you know, in terms of I'm not pushing a chicken tractor, so you know, don't the chickens are not going on live pasture on pasture and fresh pasture and things like that. And so I have to remove the chicken manure from the coop and compost it myself, and constantly, you know, keep a bedding of wood chips or whatever, not wood chips, but shavings or straw bales or things like that within the coop. You know what I'm saying? And that way we're not just having the chicken poop on the raw ground, you know what I mean, as the chickens are sleeping, because obviously we know that's the time where the chickens are laying most of their poop is like through the night. So yeah, so that's basically how that's our method of regenerative ag as far as composting. And another thing with the soil too is very key that that we do here is we like to cover crop. And so we cover crop, as well as the golden rule is what I like to abide by when it comes to soil, is maintaining roots in the soil at all times. You know, so it doesn't matter if it's a so-called what we say cash crop or a cover crop or whatever it is, but as long as you keep the roots in the soil. So when you're cripping a cover crop or something, or let's say even if just maintaining, let's say, a cash crop in the bed to be overwinterized, rather than, let's say, removing the root structure and then having to cover the soil with some type of mulching and then tarping or whatever, which is not a problem. But I've learned that maintaining the plants within the bed, whether or not if you're harvesting or not, but just keeping that root structure in there and then maintaining that in there until you're ready to plant your next crop, it keeps the soil very, very healthy, very, very loomy. And so I realized that on this new particular plot that I've been gardening on, my oldest plot is going on its 3 seasons right now, and right now in that 3rd season, the soil structure in there is very loomy, and it's very dark, and you know, could probably grow anything in there, you know what I mean? So, and it retains a lot of moisture and all that good stuff too, which is what a good compost is supposed to do. So yeah, you know, and so maintaining healthy soil is key. And that's why I guess for this first episode, just wanted to talk about how important it is to maintain a good, healthy soil. And, you know, with these practices that I use, which is not to use synthetic fertilizers and things like that, and to not overly, you know, douse the soil with all kinds of like crazy what we would call natural fertilizers as well too. And so I try to keep it very simple. And so in terms of like any additional fertilizers, I use fish hydrolyses, you know, which is basically the fish, you know, guts, liquid. And I would use that mixture with like a compost tea. And that's pretty much it. And I keep it very simple. And yeah. And so, you know, the conflicts of, you know, of good soil practices and ethical, you know, farming, you know, is due to, you know, the system that we live in, which is capitalism. And, you know, because in the capitalist model, it's in agriculture, it's the short-term gains, but it doesn't take account for the long-term effects, you know what I mean, when it comes to you know, the ecological side, you know what I mean, of things, and how it basically, you know, just slowly and surely just degrades the soil in time from using, you know, the ins and outs of just synthetic fertilizers and tillage and over and over and over again, and lack of crop rotating and all these things, right? Which or which leads to all the things that are counter to a good healthy soil. So these are the things that I would like to be talking about in this particular channel, shining light to these things, as well as just sharing my real hands-on experiences, of what goes on out here when it comes to running a market garden business. And so, but for now, I think we'll leave this episode here for now, and then we will tune in on the next episode. And be sure for those out there to, if you can hit the like, or you can comment or share this video, or post it into your favorites, or if not, you can subscribe to the channel. That way you can get notified on whenever I drop new material, and things like that. And so for those out there that love growing, happy growing, and everything, and you guys, this is Farmer Kingsley from Sound Guild Farm, signing out. All right, guys, take it easy. Happy growing out there.